Welcome to What She Does, the podcast that takes you inside the working lives of everyday women shaping the world around us. I'm Leanne Starr.
And I'm Annie Sinzinger. And each week, we sit down with someone who shows us not just what she does, but how and why she does it. Plus, find out if you fit the same mold to grab the same type of gig. Let's discover
What She Does, starting now.
Our guest is Urmi Hossain, a finance professional and public speaker whose work centers on resilience, storytelling, and women's empowerment. With a multicultural background shaped by her upbringing in Italy and roots in Bangladesh, Urmi brings a deeply personal perspective to the stage. In this episode, Urmi shares how she overcame fear, built confidence through practice, and why authenticity, not perfection, is the foundation of powerful speaking.
Nice to see you, Urmi.
Nice to see you too.
And so I'm kind of curious about being a public speaker. What's the hardest part of being a public speaker?
I would say the hardest part of being a public speaker is actually speaking.
Oh,
It's quite I think for a first timer it's always quite challenging to get up there and to be able to speak because you are feeling quite nervous at the beginning. You are, your heart is racing really fast. You have people staring at you and you're like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do if I start making a mistake? What am I going to do if whatever I'm saying, it's not making sense?" And I remember that was my very first experience when I was called upon to speak on stage and they asked me one question and I had to like do a mini impromptu speech, and I think I spoke as fast as a train. And I was like, "Oh my gosh. Oh my God." This is what I kept telling myself. I feel like I made no sense. And then I went back to my desk and I had the hands like in front of my face thinking, "Oh my gosh, that was a disaster." And then I got like a feedback afterwards where someone said, "That's okay. It's your first time speaking. I know you like said different things, but it's all about having a structure. It's all about talking about one thing. It's about slowing down." So from that first time that I spoke, I learned a little bit, like I learned right away about public speaking, but I would say the hardest part is really just going there and speak.
speaking. But what has been the best part of being a public speaker? What is your fondest memory?
My fondest memory, I think it's probably something happened recently, like some couple of months ago, something happened to me where an organization reached out, and it's a nonprofit organization that helps women who are going through domestic violence, and they're giving support. And it's mainly helping women of color, women who come from different countries. And the organization reached out to me because they were like, "We look someone as with your profile because we feel like you can relate better with the people who work for us, and we want you to talk to us about your experience with public speaking." And so for me, like the fact that they call me like out of nowhere, they reached out to me through LinkedIn. I was like, wow, I didn't think that I was like that important. But the fact that they reached out to me and they wanted me to deliver a workshop to the women of the organization, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I reached, at like a high point of my career. So for me, that was the proudest moment. Like I'm happy that they reached out to me. And when I went to give the workshop, it was very interesting for me to see who was there. It was basically like an audience made of women, and these women were between, I would say, 30 to 50, 55. And when I was looking at this woman, I was thinking, like some of these women, they have the same age as my mom. And
Wow.
so what was beautiful to see is how much they're willing to work on themselves and to become better speakers. And it's nice to see that. It's nice to see that they're really willing to invest in themselves, to really work on themselves, to use their voice, for themselves, to make a change and so forth. So that has been quite a nice experience for me.
How did you get into this? What was your motivation to pursue this?
So, so basically, what happened is I watch a lot of TEDx and I watch a lot of TED
Oh,
Talks, and I also I also love to like just watch speeches and people speaking in general. And I get really fascinated when I can see, people speaking and being inspirational, motivational, people who are using their voice to make a change and they convince you right away through a speech. So one day I watched this speech from Meghan Markle, and basically she was talking at the United Nations, and she was talking about like feminism. She was talking about women's empowerment. And as I was watching that, I was like, you know what? That's going to be me one day. And so I watched that. And then right away, I think like a week later, I was like, okay, I'm going to go and sign up to a public speaking club. And that's it. I'm going to change the world the same way that she's doing. So she was my motivation for like doing public speaking, wanting to speak and making changes basically.
And is there any kind of education or like programming that you should have for this?
So basically, I joined the Toastmasters, which is a nonprofit organization that was actually founded in California, and it has been there for 100 years. So basically, each like country has a Toastmaster club, each city has a Toastmaster club, and basically, like you get together with like people who have your same interests, who are there basically work on their public speaking skills, and there is a program that you have to follow. So once you become a member, they give you like this program called the Pathway Program, where you have a series of projects or speeches that you have to complete. They tell you the objective, they tell you like what you're supposed to be saying, they tell you the timing instructions. And then once you're ready to like give your speech, you are given like feedback from the audience, and you also have a designated person giving you feedback. And so that's the program that I had been following. And usually, like at Toastmasters, even when you're not giving an actual speech, you are taking on like smaller roles, such as, the grammarian, you have a person giving the joke, you have a person giving the moment of reflection. And even in those roles, like you're always given a feedback on like how you can improve and how you can become a better speaker. So no matter like no matter what you do at Toastmaster, you always have a role and you're always speaking. Even when you don't, like they did not assign you anything, they will call you on stage, especially during the table topic session where you practice your impromptu speeches. They will call you out of nowhere and you have to give like a mini speech, and you have to think on the feet
Wow.
right at the moment.
Okay.
So, Urmi, I was wondering for Toastmasters, they give you some assignments, right? But
Yeah.
for opportunities where you get to pick the
Hmm.
subject or topic, like what are
Yeah.
the types of topics that you want to be known for? And how do you go about it?
So I very much enjoy like storytelling. And I very much enjoy telling my stories, but also listening to other people's stories. And I always say, stories are what really gets you connected to the other person, and it's what creates the bonding between one human to another human. So I
Wow.
want to be like a storyteller. Like I want to tell my stories of, immigration, my story being a third culture kid. Like even yesterday, someone was asking me about, why did you move to Canada? Like where were your parents from? And they were asking like the story of my parents' immigration. So that's what I want to be known for. Like I want to be someone who tells stories in the most authentic way and also in the most vulnerable way. I don't like to fake it. I always want to come across as honest as possible, and I think the stories are the way to do it. So this is how I want to be known, and I feel like with every story there is a lesson learned. There's always a lesson. I feel like in every single story, like for instance, like the story of my parents moving from Bangladesh to Italy. I feel like it's a story of courage. For instance, like when you leave your home country and you go to a completely foreign country where you do not know the language, you do not know a single person there, you have no connections. That's a story of courage because you're moving in a completely foreign land and you're trying to like make a living over there. I want to be known as someone who's determined, someone who has, courage and things like that. So that's how I want to be known.
Okay. So what would you say to someone who wants to be a public speaker? Toastmasters and what else?
So Toastmaster is one place. It's definitely one place where you have a very safe environment because everyone is on your same level, or you can have someone who's a bit more experienced. But no matter what you say, people are always willing to support you. And it's a very safe environment. Everyone treats you really, really nicely. I always say it's like a second family for me. So Toastmasters is one place. And I would say the second place is for you to create opportunities. Maybe it's you like hunting for that opportunity. So there are so many, let's say, organizations, even right now, where if you are on Instagram or on Facebook, they're always looking for speakers. They're always looking for people to be panelists. They're looking for people to apply to speak at conferences. So in that case, it's up to you to like make that effort and apply to become a speaker. The third thing is you can start small and you can start in your community. So even in your local like place, wherever you live, they always need people to like deliver workshop, or they always need someone to be part of a panel, like a panel session. So maybe there is a local organization, like a nonprofit, that they're looking for speakers, and you can volunteer your time to like work on like your public speaking skills. And that could be, let's say, an opportunity just you created to put yourself out there. So that's another way. And then for someone, let's say, who works in the corporate job, I think there are also tons of opportunities where you can just go and speak to your manager and be like, I would like to train someone, or I would like to deliver a workshop, or I would like to do a presentation to a client. Even that could be a way for you to like work on your public speaking skills. And then, of course, the last method I would say is to find an actual coach who basically will coach you on a one-to-one meeting, and they can directly work on you. But I would say that everything that you decide to do, it always depends on your time and on your budget. Like, of course, having a coach is a bit more expensive, whereas let's say going to Toastmasters, you pay an annual fee, but it's like it's a feasible fee, like it's manageable to pay. So.
And what advice would you give not just to a newbie, but to yourself, to your younger self?
I wish, like when I was a kid, I wish I actually spoke out a bit more. I was I was always very afraid of like raising my hand, saying my like giving my opinion. Or let's say maybe I was in a classroom and maybe the teacher was like, "Oh, does anyone have any question?" And maybe I had tons of questions, but I was just so afraid of like raising my hand and like speaking out. And I remember like I would just wait for the office hours, or I would wait the end of the class to ask questions. But I was just always so nervous. Like I never really like had that courage to raise my hand or speak, or maybe I wanted to say something, but I never like really like stood up for me, for instance. And the same thing at home too. Like I was like really quiet, and I feel like I never raised concern and addressed any of my concern because there was always that fear. So I feel like I wish I was a bit more outspoken when it came to things that I always wanted to share. Yeah.
But that makes that makes a lot of sense. What would you like people to know about what you're doing?
So I think in general, like with all the work that I do, I think I want people to know me as multifaceted and multi-talented woman who can juggle around between like among different hats. Because I do think that, there is my women in finance hat, and I'm very proud of it. But at the same time, I do all of this like work outside of my 9 to 5, where I love to give back and I love mentoring. I love mentoring women. I love sharing my stories to women. I love being an inspiration to other women, especially women, because I feel like when I was growing up, I did not have anyone to look up to, but I want people to look up to me and see like a source of inspiration. And I want to do the same thing also for younger generations, and typically like younger like girls and, women who are a bit younger than me, and to like give this message, that you can be whoever you want to be, you can do whatever you want to do. You don't have to look for permission for doing what you want, for chasing your dream. And that's what I do like with myself too. Like I chase my dreams. I aim high, they always say aim for the moon, and this is what I do. And I'm trying to do the same thing because I feel like I also grew up in a culture where it was very much forbidden to like women or young girls in general, like to do certain things, because like in previous, just because we were like girls, we were just forbidden for doing things, like if he was a boy, then it was a different story. He can have so much freedom, he can do whatever he wants, he can stay out as much as he wants. But if you're a girl, there are so many like limitations as to what you can do. And so now that I'm much older, like I'm doing things for myself, but I want also other girls and women to do the same thing.
Is that also part of it too, is like to tell people about the culture you grew up in?
Yeah, also. Yes, also because, and I don't think it applies to my culture. I think it applies to like a lot of cultures in general. Like I always talk about the South Asian cultures, but I know it happens also in other cultures, African cultures. It happens also in other parts of Asia where, if you are a woman, you're supposed to behaving a certain way. You have to make sure that you're not tainting the reputation of the family. You have to make sure that you're obedient. Like your job is to do this, and there are always so many rules if you're a woman.
Urmi, what kind of process do you go through when you're preparing a particular engagement?
Whenever I am thinking about speaking or preparing for something, I always want to be my most authentic self. This is like the value that I live by. Like I always want to make sure that you see myself for who I am, no matter in what form or shape I'm coming. Because I think we live in a society where we're told to perform a role or to be someone, but then sometimes I feel like we're not being true to ourselves. And so for me, it's more when I think about like working on something, I always think about, okay, what would I do as a person? How can I make sure that people see me as my most authentic self, I would say, my most spontaneous way. So that's always the base of whatever I'm doing. I always make sure that there is that. And then I build off, let's say, a speech or, a project based on that. That's the core message that I have to make sure that I'm coming across as myself, as or me whenever I am speaking to someone. So I would say that's how I do it. And I also like to put always a lot of stories in every single thing that I do. And that could be, let's say, even an educational speech, and like, maybe you're teaching something to someone. I think stories are always so important to put because of that element that I said before. Like they make you connected to people, they make you relatable. You are making yourself vulnerable. And I feel like that too creates a stronger connection with their audience. And people can relate to you, like everyone thinks that we all have a perfect life, but there are struggles and challenges that we go through. And I think it's important to show yourself for that, to not always be like perfect, like got it all figured out. I'm a successful woman. Like I think that even through our imperfections, there is real a lot of beauty that we can offer to the world. Yeah.
And so you mentioned like the core part of what you're trying to do is be yourself and present
Yeah.
sort of a flawed image of yourself. But what else is most important for you in a speech to communicate to your audience? What do you want to say?
I would say it's usually so along with the story part and being my most authentic self, it's to give them a message where they can take an action from.
Mm,
I think that when you are giving a speech, you always have to remember that yes, you're giving the speech, and then you have audience or people who are paying you to see you speak.
right.
And so they have to get something out of this, right? Like it's like I can just talk about myself nonstop, but they have to get something out of this. And I think this applies to every single speaker, is that every time you're speaking, always make sure that there is a key takeaway message that your audience can walk away from and take an action. So a little bit like it happened to me when I watched that speech from Meghan Markle, and I immediately took an action of like working on my public speaking skill because she was so inspirational that I felt inspired. And so that's what I think when I'm giving a speech. Like I want someone to take an action just by listening to me. And that could be really anything. It depends on how they interpret the message. But I think like when the audience is seeing you, they always want to get something out of it. It could be an advice, it could be a tip, it could be a lesson learned, it could be a suggestion, it could be, a practical action, it could be something. But you always have to make sure that the audience is feeling like, okay, I made my money worth it by being here today. Yeah.
And
I'm just sort of wondering, as you talk about your process, the kinds of topics you discuss or want to discuss, do you use any tools to help you prepare?
I think at the beginning, before the AI, I I used a lot YouTube to get ideas. Like YouTube was actually my best friend. And I also used to use PowerPoint to, let's say, prepare for a presentation. Like I would just put keywords and I would use it more to give me a structure and a flow of how I wanted the conversation to go. But I never like made it redundant with information because no one is like no one has time to read presentations, a
Right.
PowerPoint presentation. And then what happened is, of course, there is AI. The only time that I use AI is just to give me a structure, but then I use that more like a base, and it's not like I don't use it to to I don't use it to give me a speech, because even that I think there is an issue because when you are giving a speech and you're like telling your story, it's coming from your personal experience, and AI cannot do that. I just use it to give me an idea, and then I build off my speech, and I always try to make it more like the more as natural as possible, because you cannot memorize a speech. That's the first rule about public speaking. You should never memorize a speech, because then if you forget something when you're on stage and people will see you, like people notice it when you forget it. So it's better to like make sure that it's coming from your heart, and that you have like lived experiences, and it's something that you remember that you actually have lived. So that's how I like to build it. Like I don't like to use AI to like build a speech. I use it more like, okay, let's like maybe this is the topic that I have, and then I ask it, okay, give me like a structure or a typical structure of how I should like start this. Like how should I do the opening? How should I do the body of the speech? How should I do the conclusion? And then I work based on that. Yeah. And I also have a mentor in public speaking. Like at Toastmaster, you get to have mentors,
Yeah.
and so I also use those resources to ask questions. Like my mentors are pretty experienced, so they are quite helpful.
Oh, that's nice. And
Yeah.
then what do you wish people understood about public speaking that they largely don't?
That is not as scary as they think.
Ah.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes practice for sure. For sure it takes practice, and it's scary, I know, but it's not that bad. Like I feel like once you start doing, let's say, 2 or 3 speeches, you have a rush of adrenaline and you just want to go up on stage and speak. That's how I felt. So you always have to make sure that you're speaking, because I feel like the moment you stop, the moment you take a break, then you start to feel like scared. You're like, oh my gosh, oh my, I have to go back and speak. But you have to make sure that you're speaking like on a regular basis to feel calm. Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, so what you're telling us is if we wanna do this, we have to get out there.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
um,
What size audiences do you typically have you typically been speaking to?
I would say I think I went to a maximum of 15, 18. Yeah, it's quite small. Yeah. Actually, no, I'm lying. It's not true. I did not. It wasn't 15. It was more than that. Because I went to a conference and I was part of a panel session, and I think we had probably 40 people in the audience.
oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
is it better to have a small audience or a bigger audience?
To start, I think a smaller
Yeah.
audience, but if you want to make a bigger impact, bigger audience.
Uh, true. If you
Yeah.
can get over your fear, probably a bigger audience.
Yeah, but like last year when I went to at the conference in Chicago where I was part of a panel session, it was my first time having 40 people in front of me, and they were mainly students. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've done a little public speaking myself, and it is a scary venture,
Yeah.
no
It
matter
is.
what age you are. Just hearing from somebody who's starting out, giving some inspiration to people behind you to kind of lift them up is also really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the part where I said like how can you speak? How can you find opportunities? Like I'm constantly looking for opportunities to speak. Like I applied, I think, for some conferences, and I never spoke in front of 200 people, but I know I'm ready for this. Like I wanna get like outside of my comfort zone. I want to test myself. Like I always want to I like to chase the big basically. Like that's why I'm always looking or creating opportunities where I can really work on this. Like now I do it on a smaller scale, but I know I'm ready for a bigger scale. And the only way that I will know that is if I put myself out there. Yeah.
Fingers crossed that happens for you or me, and thank you so much
Yeah.
for talking to us today.
Thanks so much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Motivational speaking, it seems like it's a growth industry?
Yeah, overall, the motivational speaking market is projected to reach about $2.3 billion.
Oh, okay.
And that's an industry growing at an annual pace of 4.1%. There's a lot of opportunity to be a motivational or keynote speaker. Public speaking is a big industry.
So the upshot of this is people make pretty good money to speak.
Well, thinking about speaking fees, you can get, somebody to do it for free.
Yeah.
You might be able to get uh $3,500 for an experience, somewhat experienced speaker, like up to that. And then if you're a really experienced speaker, like let's say a Clinton, an
Oh,
Obama, Oprah, these people are like raking in like over $100,000 for a speaking engagement. I
oh.
think even a lot of the presidents, once they left office, were like making those kind of fees to go and speak at some event.
So, and I'm also getting the impression men more than women.
Yes, there are a lot more men than women. In fact, it leans more male. Globally, only a third are female. So we need more women speaking,
I know. I know.
but it's not a
Um,
full-time job.
that's what's ironic. It would be perfect for women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
75% of the jobs are a part-time gig.
Ugh, God.
But just think if you were doing it on a regular basis, even part-time, you'd have to do a lot of public speaking
Yeah.
for it to be worth doing.
Right. Ah, that's true. But the thing is, there's no real barrier to entry. Like, you need like an entry level education, right?
Well, you don't need a degree, but it's kinda helpful to have, like, a bachelor's degree, and in particular, things like communications, maybe journalism, business communications, public relations.
Mm,
These are all communication-based
yeah.
disciplines, so it might be good to have that as a background, but I don't think that every good public speaker has necessarily these degrees. They can come from all walks of life. I think you just have to also be really good at storytelling because that's really what public speaking centers around.
And also, to be a good public speaker, I'm assuming you have to be an extrovert? Maybe?
Yeah, it starts with somebody who's a little bit more extroverted, but it's not saying that somebody who's a little bit introverted couldn't be a good public speaker. It sort of depends on what you talk about. For example, one introvert profile might be somebody who's really good at thought leadership or transformational speaking because there's a lot of kind of visionary and sort of strong narrative arc construction that you have to do, and so there's a lot more thought into that versus somebody who might be a motivational speaker where they're really energetic and they're bouncing around, like, I think Tony Robbins is kind of a good example of, like, a very energetic sort of, public speaker. He's been doing it for a really long time.
Yeah, that's true. Again, we're back to men.
I know, he's just a good
Yeah.
example, but, I think Brené Brown is probably one of the people I would think that's, like, very much in the, news all the time, not just about public speaking really, but it's about certain topical things and then really speaking out about them, so there's a lot of opportunity, it depends on what you wanna really talk about or where you wanna focus your expertise in. I think the really interesting thing for me about public speaking is how afraid people are of it.
Yes.
I mean, I saw it's like 75% of people worldwide fear public speaking. and it's
Yeah.
one of the most common social anxieties. In fact, there are 15 million people who are afraid of it, and it's
Wow.
actually a word I'd never heard of before called glossophobia. So,
Um,
if you want to be a public speaker, I think you don't necessarily have to be a super outgoing personality. I think you could
yeah,
easily be somebody who has something important you want to
to
say,
say, yeah,
and then build it around, that topic, and then you can go ahead and use things like ChatGPT or Jasper or some of these AI tools to help you kind of construct what you wanna say based on what you wanna say. But I was also surprised to find out that the most challenging part of preparation is actually creating the compelling story. Like,
ah,
what is
yeah,
the story and what should people walk away with? I mean, I think Urmi talked about that a little bit.
yes,
That's the hardest part. What are they gonna get out of it when they walk away, and is there an action that they can take?
yeah. And then the one thing I also think is interesting is so many of speakers, it's not that AI is taking their jobs, but they are giving speeches online.
Virtual presentations, I think, are just very common in general. COVID probably had a lot to do with that.
Yeah,
People are having to do a lot of digital presentations, but it's how you can reach an audience too. I mean, even think about what Ermi talked about regarding YouTube.
yeah,
In some ways, people are doing public speaking through YouTube. Whether it's a class that they're teaching or a speech
masterclass.
that they're planning to give to you.
And much broader reach that way.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know that it's necessarily a fully lucrative thing. Like, it could be a good side hustle that
Yeah,
maybe eventually turns into a full-time gig, but I I think it would be good for anyone to kind of explore this idea of learning how to be a good public speaker.
yeah, yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for joining us today. That's what she does, and maybe what you could do too. If you like what you heard, make sure you follow What She Does wherever you get your podcasts.